At my son's wedding, I was seated in the hallway, so I left. What happened next shocked everyone. Guess you don't matter anymore. That's what the seating chart said without using those words. A folding chair, a hallway, a draft coming from the service entrance that smelled like floor wax and forgotten things. Inside, I could hear the string quartet warming up, crystal glasses catching light. The low murmur of people finding their seats in a room I had not been invited into. My daughter-in-law's mother swept past me in a blush gown, pearls catching the chandelier light, heading straight for the front row. My front row. The seat I had pictured for 31 years, since the morning Marcus was born, and I held him against my chest and thought, someday I will watch this boy become someone's husband. I smoothed the front of my navy dress, adjusted the small pearl button at my wrist, set my gift bag carefully on the folding table beside me. And then I stood up, walked past the orchid arrangements, past the glittering glass doors, and out into the September evening. 4 minutes later, a sound cut through the ballroom walls. Not music, not applause. Here is what happened next. The venue was called Harrington Estate, the kind of place built to make people feel like they had arrived somewhere important. Rolling hills outside Richmond, Virginia. White columns, a reflecting pool that caught the sky like a painting. The kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines, where the flowers cost more than most people's car payments. Marcus had fallen in love with it the moment Serena showed him the brochure. That was how most things worked between them. She showed him something beautiful, and he said yes. I had raised Marcus alone from the time he was 7 years old. His father, Gerald, had left on a Tuesday in October, the kind of leaving that doesn't come with an explanation, just a half-empty closet and a note on the kitchen counter that said he needed to find himself. I stopped looking for him after the second year. What I found instead was purpose. 2 jobs for a while, then one better one. Night classes that stretched into a degree I finished 4 years late. PTA meetings and science fair projects, and a kitchen table where Marcus did his homework while I graded papers after dinner. We were a team, the 2 of us, a small and serious team. When Marcus met Serena at 26, I tried to love her the way mothers try when they sense something off but cannot name it. She was beautiful in the way that commands attention, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, a laugh that filled every room. She smiled at me warmly in the beginning, called me Mrs. Calloway, asked about my job, touched my arm at the right moments. The shift was gradual, the way seasons change. You don't notice the cold arriving until you're already in it. It started with small things. Plans Marcus and I had made, dinners on Sunday, a trip to Asheville we'd been talking about for years, quietly rescheduled, then quietly forgotten. She never said, "Don't see your mother." She never had to. She just filled every calendar square with something else. Then came the apartment incident. I had offered to help them move into their new place, 2 hours away in Richmond. I drove up with a car full of boxes and the quilt I had made for Marcus the year he graduated, navy blue and cream, sewn from pieces of his old shirts. Serena thanked me for the quilt with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She set it on a chair in the spare room. "It's charming," she said. "Very handmade." I slept on their pull-out sofa that night and overheard her tell Marcus in the kitchen that she wished I had called first, that she liked to curate the energy of their home before introducing it to guests. Guests. His mother. A guest. Marcus said, "She means well, Serena." That was the part that stayed with me. Not her words, his. She means well. Like I was a problem being managed rather than a person being loved. I drove home the next morning before anyone else woke up and sat in my kitchen for a long time with a cup of coffee that went cold. The house was quiet the way it gets when a child has grown and moved on, which is natural and right, but this felt different. This felt like being escorted out of a room I had spent 30 years building. I told myself it was an adjustment. Every mother goes through it. I told myself that lie for almost 2 years. The wedding invitation arrived in April, cream cardstock with gold lettering. Mr. Marcus Calloway and Miss Serena Whitfield request the honor of your presence. My name was on the envelope in Serena's handwriting, neat and deliberate. I bought my dress the following weekend. Navy blue, the color Marcus always said looked best on me. I scheduled a hair appointment for the morning of, spent an evening wrapping the gift, a handmade photo album I had assembled over 3 months, every photo chosen carefully. Marcus at 7, missing his 2 front teeth. Marcus at 16, the night he made varsity. Marcus at 22 at his graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. On the inside cover I had written, "You have been the greatest chapter of my life. I cannot wait to read what comes next." I drove to Richmond the evening before and stayed at a small inn nearby. I pressed my dress twice. I slept poorly. I was ready by 9 in the morning for a 4 o'clock ceremony. At 2, I arrived at Harrington Estate. The wedding coordinator, a brisk woman named Claire with a headset and a clipboard, met guests at the entrance. She was efficient and kind to most people. When she found my name, her expression did something complicated, a small tightening around the eyes. "Mrs. Calloway." She hesitated. You've been placed in the hallway seating area, just off the main entrance. I assumed I had misheard her. I'm sorry? She gestured toward the corridor that ran alongside the ballroom. A white folding table, 2 chairs, a small flower arrangement that looked like an afterthought. Through the glass panel to my left, I could see the ballroom laid out in full grandeur, rows of white chairs facing the altar, chandeliers dripping with crystal, the front row already set with name cards in gold script. One of those name cards read, Patricia Whitfield, mother of the bride. I stood very still. There must be a mistake, I said. I'm the groom's mother. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Calloway. I'm just following the chart as submitted. I looked through the glass again. A woman in blush pink was already moving toward that front row seat, Serena's mother, her pearls catching the light, her chin lifted with the particular confidence of someone who had never once questioned her own importance. I understood then that this was not a mistake. I set my gift bag on the folding table. I sat in the hallway chair. I folded my hands in my lap, the way my own mother had taught me when she said, Eleanor, the most powerful thing a woman can do is refuse to be embarrassed by what someone else has done to her. I sat there for 11 minutes. Then I thought about Marcus at 7 years old, sitting in that same kitchen, asking me if Daddy was coming back. The way I had kept my voice steady and said, it's just us now, baby. But just us is enough. I had kept my voice steady for 24 years. And I had watched that boy look at me in the church doorway that morning, past me towards Serena, without stopping to say a single word. Just us. And then not even that. I picked up my gift bag, I stood, I straightened my dress, and I walked out of Harrington Estate into the September evening. The air outside was warm and still, carrying the faint sweetness of the rose hedges lining the drive. My heels clicked against the stone path. The reflecting pool caught the last of the afternoon light, trembling slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. I almost kept walking, all the way to my car, all the way back to the inn, all the way home. But something made me stop at the edge of the garden, just beside the stone entrance wall, partially hidden by an overgrown boxwood. I opened my gift bag and looked at the photo album one more time. Marcus at 7, missing his front teeth. I thought about a conversation I'd had 3 months ago. A woman named Diane, whom I'd met at a teachers' conference in Charlottesville. We'd had dinner after the last session, and she'd mentioned, almost in passing, that her nephew had recently married a woman who had spoken about him in ways that made the hair on Diane's arms stand up. She talks about him like he's an asset, Diane had said, like he's something she acquired. I had nodded politely and changed the subject. But the week after that dinner, I'd received a message from an old friend of Marcus's, a young man named Dev who had known Marcus since middle school. Dev was hesitant, apologetic, but he said he felt I should know something. He had overheard Serena at a gathering 6 months earlier. She had been talking to a friend on the back porch, thinking no one else was nearby. Dev described her words carefully, as though he had been rehearsing how to tell me. She said Marcus was easy, that he trusted everything she said. She mentioned the house they were buying together. She said the plan was to get her name on everything before he figured out what kind of person she actually was. Dev sent me the recording 3 days later. He had been on a work call when he overheard her, and his phone had kept recording. I had listened to it 17 times. I had not told Marcus. I had tried twice, opening the conversation and losing my nerve when he answered the phone with such happiness in his voice that I couldn't bear to be the hand that removed it. But standing in the garden of Harrington Estate, a folding chair still warm behind me from sitting in a hallway where they had decided I didn't belong, I made a different choice. I went to find Claire. She was near the entrance, adjusting a floral display. When I approached, she looked surprised. Mrs. Calloway, are you all right? I'd like to leave this at the gift table, I said, and I need you to make sure Marcus opens it personally. Not Serena. Marcus. I handed her the photo album. Tucked inside the front cover, beneath my handwritten note, was a folded envelope. Inside the envelope was a printed transcript of the recording and a USB drive with the audio file. On the outside of the envelope, I had written one word. Listen. Claire looked at the bag, then at me. Of course, she said quietly. I thanked her. I walked to my car. I started the engine. I pulled out of the Harrington Estate drive and pointed myself toward the inn. The radio found an old song I hadn't heard since Marcus was small. I drove and I didn't cry. The inn was 3 miles from the estate, a converted farmhouse with a wide front porch and rocking chairs that faced the hills. I had changed out of my navy dress and into something softer, a cardigan and trousers, and I was sitting with a cup of tea watching the sky shift from gold to gray when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, Mrs. Calloway, a woman's voice controlled and careful. My name is Victoria Harrington. I own the estate where your son's wedding is being held. I'm calling because something has happened, and I believed you deserved to hear it directly. I set down my tea. She told me what had occurred in the ballroom approximately 40 minutes after I had left. Marcus had opened the photo album at the gift table while guests were gathering for cocktail hour. He had found the envelope. He had gone to a quiet corner of the estate library and played the recording on his phone. He had listened to it twice. Then he had gone back to the ballroom and asked Serena's mother to please step aside so he could speak to his new wife privately near the entrance. The conversation had not remained private for long. Victoria described it in measured terms, raised voices, Serena's initial denial, which crumbled when Marcus told her he had heard it in her own voice, her own words, her mother interceding, Marcus's groomsmen standing at a distance, unsure what to do, the string quartet finishing a piece and then sitting in silence, bows lowered. The wedding planner had quietly asked guests to take their seats for the ceremony. The ceremony had not taken place. "Your son," Victoria said carefully, "asked us to contact you. He wanted to know where you were." My hand was very steady on the phone. "Tell him I'm at the Millbrook Inn. Tell him I'm in the rocking chairs on the front porch. He'll know the ones." She paused. "Mrs. Calloway, I want you to know that I saw what happened earlier with the seating arrangement. I want to apologize on behalf of my venue. That should never have been permitted." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. I hung up and watched the hills go dark. 22 minutes later, headlights turned into the inn's gravel drive. Marcus looked the way he had at 7 the first time he understood that something permanent had changed. That particular stillness, the kind that comes when a child realizes the world is more complicated than they were told. He was still in his wedding suit. His tie was loosened. He sat in the rocking chair beside mine, and for a while neither of us said anything. The porch light drew moths in soft circles above us. "She planned it," he said finally. "The seating. She told the coordinator you'd be more comfortable with less noise, that you had trouble with crowds." I looked at my hands. "I don't have trouble with crowds." "I know." His voice was barely there. "I should have known. You loved her. That's not a character flaw. I didn't check. I just trusted her version of everything, including her version of you." He exhaled. "She kept saying you were difficult, that you didn't accept change, that you were trying to hold on too tight." He shook his head. "And I believed her because it was easier than looking closer." I thought about the brown journal I'd never had, the photos I had taken instead, thousands of them over 30 years. Marcus's first steps, his first day of school, the gap-toothed smile and the graduation cap, and the look on his face when he learned to drive on an empty Sunday morning, terrified and laughing at the same time. "You were always enough," I said. "You never needed to earn your place with me. I want you to know that. Whatever happens next, you don't owe me anything except the truth." He reached over and took my hand. We sat on that porch for 2 hours. The hills settled into full dark. A barn owl called somewhere in the distance. He didn't go back to the estate that night. Epilogue. What the silence became. The wedding was annulled 4 months later. Marcus moved back to Charlottesville temporarily, renting a small place near his old neighborhood while he found his footing. We had Sunday dinners again, the kind that ran long because neither of us was keeping track of time. He started calling on weekday evenings just to talk, the way he had in college, his voice loose and unhurried. Serena's mother sent me a letter I did not open. I returned it unopened with a brief note that said only, "There is nothing in here I need." My sister asked me once if I felt guilty for what happened, whether the recording, the envelope, the timing was too calculated to be kind. I thought about the hallway, the folding chair, the draft from the service door. I thought about Marcus's face on the porch, the particular relief of a person who has been allowed to see clearly. "No," I said. "I don't feel guilty. I feel like someone who finally stopped managing other people's comfort at the expense of the truth." I still have the navy dress. I wore it to Marcus's birthday dinner in February, a small restaurant with good lighting and no occasion except the one we made. He looked at me across the table and said, "You look great, Mom." And that was all, and that was everything. The hallway smelled like floor wax and borrowed time. The porch smelled like September and something returning. They thought seating me by the service entrance would silence me. They had mistaken my patience for weakness for 30 years. They had confused my stillness for compliance. But the most dangerous person in any room is not the one making noise. It's the one who has been quietly watching, quietly remembering, quietly deciding when enough is finally enough. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, picked up my gift, and let the truth do what I never could. They gave me a folding chair in a hallway. I gave my son his life back. And somewhere in that exchange, I found something I had misplaced years ago. Myself. If you have ever been pushed to the edges by the people who were supposed to save you a seat at the table, I want you to hear this. Your silence is not weakness. Your leaving is not failure. And your truth, when it finally arrives, does not need to shout. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? Almi Sarin